The auction yard reeked of spilled whiskey, sweat, and hopelessness. Men with hollow eyes gathered under the dusty wooden beams, their voices rough as they bargained for cattle, tools, and sometimes, human souls. On that blistering summer afternoon, silence fell heavy when a trembling little girl was dragged forward by a man too drunk to walk straight. Her eyes were wide, searching, but her lips moved in silence, and the crowd whispered, "She's deaf." The drunkard, her father, shoved her onto the platform with a cruel laugh, raising his bottle in the air. "Can't hear a damn thing, but she can work. Who'll take her? Who'll give me $1 for this useless mouth to feed?" His words stung sharper than whips. The child flinched, clutching the hem of her torn dress, her small face streaked with dirt and tears. And in that moment, standing apart from the crowd, was a man no one expected to move. Samuel Hayes, the rancher everyone in town called the Ghost. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-beaten skin and eyes that held more sorrow than a man his age should carry. For years, he had lived alone on his sprawling ranch, his only company the horses he raised and the silence that wrapped itself around his empty home. No one ever saw him in town unless it was to buy supplies. They said he was a broken man, that he'd buried more dreams than most men dared to dream. And maybe they were right. But when his gaze fell on the fragile girl trembling in that cruel auction, something deep inside his chest stirred, a memory of loss, of loneliness, of needing someone to see worth where the world only saw ruin. Before anyone else could speak, Samuel's voice cut through the murmurs. "I'll take her." The drunk father laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Samuel's steady hand pulled out coins. With a look that silenced even the cruelest men in the room, he bought the girl, scooped her into his arms, and walked away without another word. Friends, before we go deeper into this story of unexpected love, redemption, and second chances, let me pause for a moment. If you believe in kindness, in the power of compassion to change a life, then please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Every click and comment helps us spread more stories of humanity and second chances. As Samuel rode home with the girl cradled carefully before him on the saddle, her small body stiff with fear, he realized he didn't even know her name. She wouldn't meet his eyes, only stared at the horizon as if afraid he might return her. His ranch, sprawling across the golden plains, seemed lonelier than ever as he carried her inside. He set a plate of food before her, bread and stew, but she didn't move until he gently pushed it toward her. When she ate, her tiny hands shook, as though every bite was a fight against the hunger she'd learned to hide. Days turned into weeks, and though she never spoke, she began to move like a shadow behind him, silent, watchful, careful. Samuel repaired a small room for her, placed books on a shelf though he wasn't sure she could read, and left flowers in a cup on her table when he returned from the fields. She never smiled, never laughed, only watched with those haunting eyes. The town whispered. They said Samuel was a fool, that no man should waste himself on a deaf child who'd never repay his kindness. But Samuel didn't listen. In her silence, he saw a reflection of his own solitude. Then, one evening as the sun bled red across the horizon, Samuel was mending a fence when he heard the faintest sound. A melody, a hum. He froze, turning toward the porch where the girl sat with her arms wrapped around her knees. Her lips moved softly, and the hum, clear and gentle, carried across the air. Samuel's heart stopped. She wasn't deaf. He walked slowly toward her, the boards of the porch creaking under his boots. Her eyes widened, and she stopped humming, terror flashing in them as if she had been caught committing a crime. Samuel knelt before her, his calloused hand trembling as he touched her shoulder. In that silence, everything became clear. She had pretended, or been forced to pretend, to be deaf. The truth unfolded painfully over time. She had hidden her voice, hidden her hearing, because her father had beaten her whenever she cried, whenever she sang, whenever she dared to speak. To survive, she chose silence. To escape pain, she let the world believe she was broken. Samuel's heart shattered at the cruelty, and for the first time in years, tears burned his eyes. He promised her, not with words but with the gentleness of his actions, that she would never again be punished for being who she was. As the seasons turned, the girl, whom Samuel now called Clara, after his late wife's favorite name, blossomed under his care. She learned to laugh, to speak softly, to read stories by the fire. The ranch that had been filled only with silence now echoed with small footsteps, with laughter carried by the wind, with songs hummed in the barn as she brushed the horses. And Samuel, the lonely rancher who had once buried his heart, found it beating again with a new rhythm, hope. But life never stayed gentle for long. The drunk father returned one night, demanding money, claiming his rights over the daughter he had sold. He shouted threats, his fists heavy with rage, and for the first time, Clara stood tall before him. She clung to Samuel's side and shook her head. "I'm not going back," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. The man lunged, but Samuel, with a strength born of love and fury, threw him out into the dirt and made it clear, Clara was no longer his to hurt. That night, Samuel held Clara as she cried, not from fear, but from relief. She was home. She was safe. Years passed, and Clara grew into a young woman with courage in her heart. She helped Samuel run the ranch, read to him when his eyes grew tired, and filled the once empty home with life. Samuel often sat on the porch, watching her sing to the horses, marveling at the miracle he had stumbled upon the day he chose kindness over silence. And perhaps the most remarkable truth was this: in saving her, Clara had saved him too. The lonely rancher had found family, love, and a second chance at life in the very soul the world had cast aside. Friends, if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of compassion and the beauty of second chances, I ask you now, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support allows us to continue bringing these heartfelt stories to life. And before we end, here's a special request. Drop a comment below and tell us, do you believe kindness can change a life? Your words might just inspire someone else today. Samuel Hayes was not a man who believed in miracles. Life had taken too much from him for faith to survive easily. Years ago, before the loneliness, before the silence, he had been a husband and a father. His wife, Margaret, had been his light, and their baby boy the reason he woke each day. But sickness did not care for love. First his child, then his wife, both taken in the cruel space of a year. He buried them on the hill that overlooked the ranch, and for nearly a decade after, Samuel lived as though he were already half buried himself. Work became his prison and his salvation, every fence mended and every foal delivered a way to drown out the grief clawing inside him. He swore he would never open his heart again, for love had proven to be a thief. And yet, when he carried Clara home from that filthy auction yard, something shifted in him. It wasn't sudden joy, nor was it hope, not yet. It was more like a seed, fragile and hidden, buried deep in the soil of his broken heart. The child didn't speak, didn't smile, but her very presence filled the air with something he hadn't felt in years, responsibility, and the faintest spark of belonging. In those first weeks, Clara was like a shadow. She trailed behind him in silence, never asking, never reaching. At night, Samuel sometimes found her sitting awake in her small bed, knees pulled tight to her chest, eyes staring at the dark as though waiting for someone to strike her. He never scolded, never pressed her with questions. Instead, he left a lantern burning softly by her door, and each morning he placed small kindnesses where she could find them: an apple from the orchard, a ribbon for her hair, a smooth stone shaped like a heart he had picked from the creek. She never thanked him with words, but he noticed the way her fingers lingered on those tokens, the way her breathing eased when she thought no one watched. The townsfolk kept talking. They laughed behind his back, whispering that Samuel had gone soft, that he was wasting his money and time on a child who'd never repay him. Some pitied him, others mocked him outright, but Samuel had long since stopped caring about town gossip. His ranch was his world, and now, slowly, Clara was becoming part of that world too. One evening, as the cattle grazed and the sky turned the color of old embers, Samuel saw Clara standing by the corral, her small hands brushing the muzzle of a young colt. Horses had always been his solace, but watching Clara, he realized they were hers too. The colt, usually skittish with strangers, leaned into her touch, sighing as though soothed by her presence. Samuel watched silently, a warmth unfurling in his chest. Maybe, he thought, she wasn't as lost as she seemed. Maybe both of them still had pieces of life worth living for. And then came the day of the humming. The moment that broke open the silence and revealed the truth Samuel never expected, that Clara wasn't deaf at all. That discovery struck him harder than any storm, not because she had deceived him, but because it showed how much pain she had endured. A child choosing silence as armor, believing her voice was a curse, broke Samuel's heart into pieces he didn't know were left. From that day forward, he made it his mission not just to give her shelter, but to give her freedom, the freedom to be heard, to be loved without fear. He encouraged her gently, never forcing, only listening when she dared to speak. The first time she said his name, Samuel, it was like hearing music after a lifetime of silence. He didn't cry, not in front of her, but that night, sitting on the porch beneath the stars, his chest ached with gratitude. Life on the ranch began to change. The house no longer echoed with emptiness, it carried Clara's laughter, the sound of her footsteps running down the hallway, the soft tunes she hummed in the fields. She was no longer a shadow. She was sunlight breaking through storm clouds, bringing warmth to the coldest corners of Samuel's heart. And as he watched her grow braver, stronger, and freer, he realized that perhaps God had not abandoned him after all. Perhaps, in the smallest, most unexpected way, he had given Samuel a second chance, not to replace the family he lost, but to build something new, something just as precious.